I'm not sure how true this is, but based on commentary from social media, many PMs express feeling undervalued, underappreciated, or like an overhead rather than a core contributor. This often stems from PMs not being revenue generating, leading to perceptions that it is administrative busy work rather than strategic leadership. For instance, PMs often report being scapegoated for failures while receiving little credit for successes, with comments like, "We make the complex look easy," highlighting how seamless execution masks their efforts. Further, burnout is rampant in our industry due to constant stress, unrealistic expectations, and a lack of support and resources, with some describing it as a 24/7 email job with no real satisfaction. However, those who specialize, for example, in AI, cybersecurity, or cloud, feel more cared for through higher pay and demand. Positive voices emphasize PM's transferable skills and indispensability, but these are often outnumbered by complaints of being micromanaged or dismissed as non technical. So, in a world where every innovation starts as a project, why do so many project managers feel like unsung heroes, or worse, the forgotten ones, left to battle burnout and bureaucracy alone? Today, we're going to explore this very topic with the illustrious and learned Colin D. Ellis. At Powering ProjeX, we champion the growth of project people, empowering every subscriber to lead with distinction, drive impactful outcomes, and turn vision into victory. Through sharp insights, inspiring stories, and energetic conversations, we will celebrate the exceptional people who transform industries and build a better world. Welcome to the Powering ProjeX podcast, where we explore the strategies, stories, and insights that make projects thrive. I'm your host, DK, and today we're exploring, does anyone really care about project management? And I'm thrilled to once again be joined by Colin D. Ellis, a global expert on evolving project cultures and conscious leadership. We'll dive into the frustrations, triumphs, and hidden truths of this vital field, exploring why PMs often feel undervalued and how we can reignite their passion for the game. But before we kick off, if you want to join a community that puts your career first, gain global connections, cutting edge skills, and hear from voices just like yours who are shaping the project management industry, subscribe to the podcast now. Colin Ellis is a globally recognized consultant, speaker, and 5 times best-selling author specializing in workplace culture and project leadership. Originally from the UK, he now travels worldwide to deliver speeches and programs aimed at transforming organizational cultures to foster success, happiness, and safety. Colin's key contributions include having authored 5 best-selling books, including his latest book, Detox Your Culture, which has been shortlisted for a Business Book of the Year award, as well as the award-winning The Project Book. He works with organisations across sectors like sports, government and FMCG, pharmaceuticals and startups to build vibrant, high-performance cultures. He provides practical strategies for improving emotional intelligence, managing multi-generational workforces, and enhancing psychological safety. And he also runs a YouTube channel podcast called Colin on Culture and a daily blog providing practical insights on culture building, which I receive to my inbox every day. Colin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Okay, great. Love it. My favorite podcast. Love it.
All right, good. So I'm going to start with a big smile and say, Colin, thank you so much for joining me today again.
The listeners will be absolutely sick of me, DK. They'll be like, not this guy again.
I am sure they're all going to love it. You are so entertaining. Um, so, the problem statement for today, Colin, is does anyone really care about project management? What are your thoughts?
Not in my household. Um, does anybody go? Oh my goodness, where even to start with that? Not. I suppose that the short answer, DK, is not enough. Project managers obviously care. They're on a profession pathway. They see a future, and consistently delivering value to the business is what they're all about. Does the wider business care? Not probably not as much as it should do, really. It's one of two things, DK. It's either an administrative overhead, or it's just something that anyone can do. And when it's something that anybody can do, then it doesn't really, kind of gain that sense of importance that it needs to become a truly valued profession, within whichever business you work in.
And you're spot on. When you think about the number of accidental PMs, so I know that I started as an accidental
Mm.
PM, and I think you did too.
I did. Yeah, I did. I was selling
Yeah.
selling advertising space for a newspaper. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so the funny part about that is if the business and leadership teams truly believe that this is all, any person off the street can become a project manager and become a good project manager, which is somewhat true because with trial and error, you'll definitely get there. But how much error is acceptable error before we admit that it would have been a better choice to potentially choose a cohort of people, put them through some appropriate training, and then let them loose on project deliverables?
It's somewhat true, DK. And I think the project management profession, I mean, this podcast could go so many ways here. Let's just light a fire at the start. So for far too long, let's just get this fire going. For far too long, the project management profession has focused on accreditation, right? So, and as distinctly different from making sure that there's good training. Now, training is really important. It provides us with the skills that we need to be able to do a job, regardless of what it is. And then it's the individual's responsibility to then apply those skills. And there's a level of discomfort involved in applying those skills if you want to become really good at something. The project management profession has focused on certification. If you get this certificate, you're a qualified project manager. Now, those two things are different. And this
Yes.
always jars with people when I talk about this. It's like, but surely I'm being taught all of the skills to do project management. And so my analogy here is uh, when you learn HR in university and when you get into a job, they're often very, very different. Now, at least with project management
Yes.
certification, as someone who's done it, there's an element, I would say, I always say I could apply at least 40%. People are always shocked at 40%. You take something like a Prince 2. Yeah, in an ideal world, wouldn't it be great if people followed a process and you filled in a document? You try getting people to fill in a document. You try getting someone to read a business case or whatever it might be. That's then the challenge. And so there's two different things. Are we training people in the right things, or are we focused on accreditation? If we focus on accreditation, and don't get me wrong, it's important that people are accredited, they have the right skills and the right level of whatever it is. But are those the right skills? And so that for me is one of the biggest issues facing the profession still to this day.
And I find this really interesting as well because when I think back to the certification that I performed, okay, so what I was asked to do was there was a structural document that was given to me across 12 disciplines of project management. I was asked to complete that and provide examples and evidence that I had applied those skills to a project. And what I found interesting about that is I knew enough about the frameworks and techniques to be able to say, well, these are what they are. This is how I applied them. But when you're completing it on a blank Word document and you're writing the story, it's very different to having somebody there or having someone pre-train you. Does that make sense? And actually watching you undertake those activities and sort of giving you pointers. That certification model, the evidence-based certification model, does not really assess your competence in anything. It just says, do you know what these are and have you tried to apply them in a project? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It's very much after the fact.
yeah, have you tried to apply them? So, when I used to head up project departments, so I had people that did the project, the PM, is it PMP? Is that what it's called? In the
Yes,
PMI,
PMP.
and also Prince 2. And at the time, there was this, so I'm talking about kind of 2010-ish, so quite a while ago now, but there was this, are you a Prince 2 shop or are you a PMI shop, which was just the wrong question to ask. Hopefully people aren't still doing that, because for me it was all about, well, are you just a good project management shop? Because what you do is you kind of learn from each of the methods, and then you create something that works for your organization. What you don't do is you apply something carte blanche and go, this is the way that we're going to do things, which is the mistake that most organizations make. We're going to do this in its entirety. Well, it's never going to work that way. And so what you want to do is you want to take elements of these. Sorry, but the point that I was going to make is I had people who were doing PMI, and you had to do the evidence based, which I'm all for, by the way. I think it's a great thing to do. But what we were trying to do was retrofit the work that was happening to the principles, rather, because the real world dictates that it doesn't happen in the way that it's set out in a book. Who knew? And so we
Yeah.
ended up having to retrofit it in order that we could justify the investment, so someone could gain certification. And it became, we were just
Mm.
like, what's the point in doing this? And actually what we then
Mm.
did was create our own in-house project management program, which very few organizations do. I read recent research, I think last year, so in 2023, so the year, we're always a year behind, 2023, it was something like, 56% were going to invest in their own internal project management capability programs. And then last year's 2024, it was down to 38%. And I'm amazed that 38% do it, because when you look at the statistics, it
So
doesn't
I
go
must
down.
say, I have not been part of an organization that had a documented project management capability since my very first project management job. And God bless them, they had such a well documented method. However, the documentation of the method had become so verbose that it was really difficult to try and understand how to tailor it for smaller and medium size initiatives. It had kind of blown out to the size where it was for extra large projects only. Do you know what I mean? But the thing that then confuses me even more is, as part of the gig economy now, I join organizations and I say, okay, where's your project management plan for this? Oh, we don't do PMPs. Okay, so do you have a methodology written down? Oh, no, no, no. So how am I meant to understand how you deliver projects? Because every organization tends to do it differently. And for me, this is one of the things that doesn't really get picked up in the certification and exam-based models, because all of us are doing it differently. Every organization you move into has developed their own almost Frankenstein method of how to deliver projects.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, so much in what you just said there is one of the issues that I have with project officers and project management officers is they train people on the method rather than helping people to understand how we deliver projects here. The how becomes all about the method, and it's not, because, the best projects ever result of the people that lead them and the environment they create for others to be successful. And yes, it's important that you understand the way, like you said, in the gig economy, the way that you do it. But actually, we want to make sure that people have got the people skills. They know how to lead. They can, they can have courageous conversations. They know how to set really clear expectations to make sure people deliver tasks on time. They're so great at planning that, you're predicting 4-6 weeks ahead, which is stuff that, I learned pre any of the methods. And so you have this almost like an ideological clash between the way we do projects is through a method rather than the way that we do projects is through people. Now, when I used to hire like contract staff, what I used to do, the interview would solely focus on who they were as a human being and how good they were at building teams. And then we had some form of method, and we said, listen, this is the way that we document this, 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 and this, but you'll be judged on how good a human being you are and how great a team you build. And of course, what we found was the people who knew how to lead and the people that built great teams were easily the most successful, whereas the people who were slave to a method were very good at following a method until such time it broke down, and then they didn't really know what to do. And so we still have this ideological clash, DK, and it's important for project managers to understand the approach that the organization's taken. It's important that the organization has an approach, but it's equally important that they've got the people and team building skills to be able to deliver any project in any organization, in any country, in any industry, without that, because they've just got that kind of sense of this is what's required at this time to deliver this project.
This is such a good point you make, because I'll be honest, I'm not sure that I've ever been, or maybe they have been judging me on the person that I am, but I wasn't conscious of it. They were more interested in, have you been successful? How did you navigate your way through failures and troubles? But I'm not sure that they were really focused on, who am I as a person and how do I build teams to get to outcomes? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
and that's common, DK. Um,
Yeah.
what most organizations, when you look at the project management development programs, it's all about teaching people how to fill in forms, and that is
Yeah.
that is a third of project management, and it's at the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
You think about
Yeah.
the best projects ever. It's someone knows how to build relationships. Someone knows how to have conversation. Someone knows how to exert
True.
influence rather than power. And also they know how to
True.
create a really great team, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When I think about going back to that whole concept of what is, walking into an organization fresh, the only way I can work out the method is to talk to 25 people.
Right.
So that's what I do. I literally go and end up having conversations with the leads of all the departments, and they do take the time to explain it to me. But the most valuable thing that comes out of that is not me understanding the method, it's the fact that I've taken the time to ask. They're really grateful that I asked, rather than me ending up falling between the cracks.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And then being able to, be clear that I understand what they need. And then I'm just constantly following up. Is that correct? Is that right? Did I make it through the process, so that we can keep proceeding forward? But it is very much that, isn't it? Just getting to know people and
Yeah, so whenever I do
working with them.
whenever people approach me to do project management work, DK, which is very infrequently, I have to say, even though that's where my business started 10 years ago, because that was what I was known for, in inverted commas, that was my area of expertise. What I really wanted, what I loved most of all was the team building part, which is why kind of naturally I went down the culture path. But when they do approach me, I always say, listen, what's your approach to project management? And if they don't have one, I'll say, I've got something really simple that you can use. It's one of these forms, you fill in this. But I was like, but it's less about that and more about what are those people skills or those team building skills. You still need the technical skills. One of the things I teach is work breakdown structure. And
Yeah.
work breakdown structure is the most basic of project management skills, and yet so many people still don't know how to do it. And it's not even about, because somebody challenged me once and they said, oh, but we live in a more digital world now. I was like, but it's less about post-it notes and writing on post-it notes, and it's more about critical thinking, how you break stuff down. How am I planning ahead? How am I projecting the people, not resources, the people that I need in 4 weeks' time? And then how am I approaching that? What mechanisms am I using to make sure that they know that they've got to do this work in 4 weeks' time? And then they know who else they need to speak to. It's some of those basics we still don't have.
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to take people on a forward journey, that they don't quite believe in. Because, you and I would have both had, any project manager would have had this situation where you are explaining the project to somebody for the first time. And you can tell they don't believe in it the way that you do. Do you know what I mean? Because I've already gone through all of the thinking and written it all out and convinced myself that that is the right path, right? So, and I've done that normally with a group full of people, and then I've got to present it out to a greater group of people, and I sit there and I have to take them on that journey, and I have to answer all of their questions, and as you say, influence and guide and create trust and build rapport and all of those things. And it's really, really tricky, but it's so important to what we do.
But this is one of the core skills, right? Communication is one of the core skills of project management, right? Is knowing how to deliver a message to different people, different roles, different personalities, different parts of the organization. And teaching people how to communicate traditionally was not part of any curriculum. It wasn't part of PMI. It wasn't part of Prince 2. And so you were putting people in front of people and saying, right, you just have that conversation with them and make sure that they understand the value of this. And they couldn't do it. What we do typically as humans is we're pretty selfish. And I don't mean that negatively. It's just, it's the only way we know how. I'm going to much like I'm doing now, I'm going to communicate this message to you in the way that I think is best. And so my personality, obviously lots of passion, lots of energy, lots of arm waving, which people can't see on the podcast, but I'm doing right now, rather than thinking about, well, who's my audience here? And whenever I talk to introverts about becoming project managers, because they're like, oh, well, you have to be an extrovert, you have to be one of these real action people. I'm like, no, you don't. You just need to understand how to communicate differently. And the way to get someone to actually work on your project is make them feel part of a team. So involve them in the team building process, set really clear expectations so they know what they need to do, when they need to do it, to what level of quality, and then choose your communication in a way that they feel motivated to deliver. And these
Yeah.
are all human skills
Yeah.
that we're
Yeah.
just not
Yeah.
very good at teaching people.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure you give an example of this in your book, actually. Now that you're telling me the story, I think, did you not have a leader that actually said to you, Colin, that behavior style is not going to work in every meeting
That
or something
communication
along?
style, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was really great feedback, and that was really early on in my project management career. But what I then did, DK, is I had a curiosity about my own development. I wasn't going to just focus on this is what Prince 2 teaches you. I'm like, well, how do I learn how to communicate? I know that sounds daft, but we don't know how to
Mm,
communicate because we learn from our
mm,
parents. And I
mm.
remember the actual conversation was with my boss, and I was managing a team of software developers, and I said, these guys are idiots. And he heard me out, and then he was like, "You're the idiot. You need to change your style of communication. They're not going to do everything an extrovert wants to do." I was like, "What?
Yeah.
Why?" And and then I learned how to do it, and
Correct.
and and
Correct.
I was just making an assumption that my communication style would work for everybody, and of course, it was never going to do that. But it
No.
takes feedback to help you learn.
It does. And it's a really interesting example that you bring up because I think you and I talked about this in a restaurant just recently where
It's nice to be able to say that, right? Yeah.
that's right. um, where I was not only one of the only women on a floor of 300 men,
Mm.
but I was the only project manager on that floor, and I was surrounded by software engineers. And they literally thought that I was batshit bonkers. I'll just say it out loud, just purely because I had such a different style. And it was the first time in my career, and I think I was probably about 4 or 5 years into project management at this stage, where I really started to realize that I would be working with engineers for the rest of my life and that they are naturally introverts. And I really had to adapt what I was doing. I could not be my normal, I could not be the project management show person in every single meeting and in every single way, right? There had to be times where I could tone it right back and just be willing to absorb everything I needed to learn from them in order to be able to broker, right? Between clients and software engineers, which, was a big part of my role for a long time, doing that um, interpretation, as you would say, between the two.
Yeah,
So it's a really difficult one.
it is. So, whenever I do 2 day project management training, and the first half day is all about building relationships and communicating, because people often think when you change how you communicate, you change who you are, but you don't. You're still the same human with the same values, the same upbringing, the same personality, all of the same. But it's understanding how to change your style and how to build a relationship with someone such that you have empathy for them. And this is one of the things I learned really early on. And this podcast isn't about software developers. It just happens to be that's our experience.
Correct.
Is
Yeah.
is I didn't understand. I understand enough about the technology that we were working on to ask the right questions, but I didn't know how to ask the questions in the right way. And so once I develop those relationships, and that's always the first thing, is build a relationship with someone first. And it's not about asking them really awkward questions. It's about finding out what makes them tick. A really simple question is, how do you like work to be set for you? If I'm managing this project and I'm making sure things happen, what's the best way for me to communicate to you? How do you like to receive information? What level of involvement do you want in what, and it's about finding those things out at the start and then developing your communication style from there. One of the things that I learned, in the 4 years that I was managing those big software projects, was to turn my mouth off and my ears on. And that
Mm.
kind of was an emotionally kind of mature learning curve for me, because it's something
Yeah.
prior to then I hadn't really done, especially being a salesperson when your mouth's on constantly. And so that's
Yes.
something I really had to learn, and it's a life skill. Once you learn how to communicate, it's a life skill you never forget.
And that's an interesting one because a certain part of our jobs as PMs, like I know that you and I have discussed this before around business casing and the kind of skills you need to sell an investment to potential investors, right? So we've got a solution, we think we want to put it in place, we think it's going to have a return on investment. We've looked at all these different options, we've assessed all the risks and the pros and cons, and now we're going to go up for some investment. The person that we need to sell that investment then needs to come back to their desk and actually work with a group of people to actually get it done. And they're very different skill sets. And there is a little bit of content switching, personality switching that goes on between all of these activities.
And it's all about selling the value of either doing something or not doing something, DK. And again, it's another one of those skills, is how do we make sure that people often say to me, how do I get a stakeholder to buy into something that they're not necessarily convinced of? It's like, well, you have to find the angle that's going to convince them. And it's as
Yeah.
simple as that.
Yeah.
Is what's the
Yeah.
hook? Often another question I'll get at project management conferences is, how do I get someone to work on my project if they don't want to work on it? Well, what's the value
Yeah.
to them of working on it? What skills is it going
Yeah.
to give them? What access is going to give them? If nothing else, they get to work on this unique, kind of discrete piece of something for a moment
Yeah.
in time, and you're going to make it a really
Yeah.
great experience. And we're just not,
Yeah.
again, none of that is part of a curriculum. Whenever you do Prince 2 or anything like, they don't teach you that stuff, which is why those internal
Correct.
programs are so important.
Yeah. And you touched on really two really valuable things there, which is in order for me to sell you something that you're not sure about, I need to understand what's valuable to you.
Mm.
And I'm only going to learn that through asking questions. And it's exactly the same thing with your team. Unless I know who you are and what makes you tick, I'm never going to be able to convince you of something because I won't be able to hit on the right buttons
That's right.
and triggers that make you feel like this is something that's of value to you.
100%. And what you'll
Yeah.
find in many organizations, DK, is that people are just overwhelmed with work. So you coming along with
Yeah.
another project that they've been earmarked for, whilst you might be excited and selling them the possibility, they could give a shit because they've got 50 other things
Yeah.
that 50 other people are telling them are the most important thing. So how do you make your thing
Yes.
stand out? And I remember doing it. I remember crossing swords with another project manager because I had a particular team member who was working more than they should on my project. And I was really happy for them to do that. Of course I was. And he was just like, but why? Why do they want to work on your project? And it was one of those like, they just feel part of something here. You know,
Yeah.
I'd spent a day just doing team building ahead of the project started.
Yeah.
I was like, they just feel part of something. Have you done anything like that? Oh, well, that's not fair.
Yeah.
I haven't got the money. I was like, I didn't have the money, but I did it.
Yes. That is really
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
Absolutely. I've never thought about doing a full day's team building, I must say. It's a really interesting concept to start every project that way and to really help people feel, as you say, part of something that is bigger than themselves, where this is not just another project. You're part of a movement, you know?
Well, that's right. And project management, the content matter and some of the relationships can be complex. But at its core, project management is build a team, build a plan, deliver the project. Always in that order. It doesn't matter what kind of project it is. Doesn't matter which method you're using. You have to build a team first, because only when you have a good team can you create a really good plan. And then only when you've got a really good plan can you actually deliver the project. Otherwise, it's just going to be just a non-stop battle and a fight without a plan. But without a team, there's no sense of commitment. There's no sense of camaraderie. People aren't united behind a vision or deliver a product that's going to execute the value. you, you, so without that team building, you're kind of on the
Yeah.
back foot straight away, DK. Yeah. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
when I've spoken about this in the past, people are like, oh, well, does it have to be a day? I'm like, it depends on the size of your team, it depends on the size of your project. If it's
Yeah.
just you and one other person, you can do it in an hour. Just get to know each other,
Yeah.
talk about what you want to achieve, talk about the behaviors that you'll demonstrate, how you're going to collaborate, how you're going to work together, how you're going to celebrate success. Some of those core things that being part of a team, really means to you. But
Yeah.
but if you're doing a big piece of work, I've run 2-day workshops for teams who are doing big piece of work, and those projects are always successful, however they measure them, because you have the commitment and the camaraderie from the start.
Yeah, correct. I must say, one of the great things that I have seen once in a past life, they were so a department had built out a whole agile. So they had gone from full waterfall to full agile. And they did this over the course of 18 months. So they did a really solid job of it. But it just goes to show how much of a cultural change it is moving from a fully waterfall environment to agility. And what had happened was each of the teams was required to develop their own 8 guiding principles. And every team had the guiding principles on the wall
Great.
as you entered their block, right? And it was really interesting because they had to pass by it every morning and they had to live by it. And it became part of their sort of creed. Each team had its own creed. And I thought that was quite amazing. Like to get people to buy into values is a big thing.
So what people forget about the agile movement is that it was born out of a desire for a different culture around delivery. So, kind of Snowbird Resort in Utah, 2001, you had, I think it was 18 or 20 software developers got together, and they produced this manifesto, and the manifesto talked about how do we change the culture of delivery. And then what the world did was they tried to sell agile as a method. And of course, the original signatories were horrified about this. They're like, "This isn't. We don't want any more structure. We told you that's not what we wanted. What we want is a different culture around the way that we deliver projects." And a big part of that is this connection, it's trust, it's empowerment, it's empathy, it's all of these things. And so, what the organizations that did agile well recognized that let's just give them the opportunity to build a tribe, squad, whatever you want to call it. In different organizations call them different things, and to build that sense of identity. And once they've got that identity, then what they've got then is the trust, the empathy, which is the glue that holds teams together. And so they'll naturally, deliver a bit of code and then, check it, test it, deliver another bit of code, test it, deliver another bit of code. And Waterfall could do that. Waterfall could do that by
Yeah.
building a team up front, but they just didn't, because it was this old fashioned
Yeah.
engineering driven by some middle-aged fella who had lacked the communication skills, compassion, and empathy. I used to joke all the time, DK, that how do you know when a project is failing? Is you put a middle-aged man in to shout and scream at everybody to get it back on track, which is the opposite of what you actually need to get a project back on track.
That is so interesting. So, because I was about to say put the old column in place. Put the old column in there. So this is interesting because one of the things that I really love about Agile, however, the older I get, the more I see this concept everywhere throughout the world. Um, it's the concept of feedback loops and really tight feedback loops, right? And there is a lot in this that's about communication because I see some, you know, I'd say loosely world leaders that are really engaged in feedback loops with people, within organizations, within projects. Um, I'm doing something, I want your feedback on this so that I can improve. And yet it is something that I see is sorely missing 90% of the time. And I want to really explore this with you because it fascinates me that we have so much evidence of how we can improve, and yet we just fail to absorb it and we fail to use it. And I wonder why. What is it?
So there's two ways we could go here. I'll go one way and I'll come back the other way. So the first thing is people either forget or don't realize that projects are a democracy, not an autocracy. And that means you need a group of people working together for a common goal in order to deliver something. If it's just one person driving, it becomes that one person's vision, and eventually the whole democracy will just break, and we either remove the autocratic leader or we accept that that's the way that things get done, and you lose all the good people who want to work in a democracy. So that's the first thing. And in my experience, that's often the case, right? The second thing is that organizations are terrible at learning from the mistakes of the past. And so these are those two kinds of feedback loops. In a democracy, we're very good at providing feedback in order to continually evolve and improve the way that we do things. Autocracy in autocratic projects, not interested in feedback at all. It's my way or the highway kind of thing. But this kind of constantly repeating the mistakes of the past means that we end up providing feedback in a report that gets summarized at the end of the project, by which time it's too late to actually affect future projects, or else it just becomes another line on a spreadsheet, DK. And most organizations are terrible at kind of not learning the mistakes from the past, not listening to the feedback. There'll be project managers listening to this
Yes.
going, God, I told them that this was a problem in my project and they did nothing. And then they wonder why they have
Yes.
consistent project failure.
Yes, yes. And I see it over and over and over again. And I think to myself, and it's probably me too. I have to be really careful saying this because, Dee, you've probably done exactly the same thing. But I look at, especially with processes and project management processes. So you walk into an organization, this is how we do things here, not a problem. I'll follow your lead. We start going through that, and you start recognizing that this process is so fundamentally broken. It doesn't work whatsoever. It's meant to make things more efficient. In fact, it's made things 10 weeks longer than anything needs to be. I'm surprised we get anything through the process. And you go and deliver the feedback to someone, whoever that may be. But everybody in the organization seems to feel powerless to do anything about it. And there is something really interesting in that for me, because why is it that we create processes, but everybody feels powerless to fix them?
You know, DK, often in my experience, what I find is there's an autocratic PMO manager that sits atop the pile who's desperate for a seat at the top table and is not really listening to what works and what doesn't on a day-to-day basis. And I don't know how we got ourselves into this position where these processes are almost untouchable, rather than what do we need to do in order to make things easier to deliver. It becomes all about what are the boxes that we need to tick to satisfy that
Yeah.
individual to make sure we're doing things in the right way, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
I spoke to someone about PMOs recently, and they were like, what does a good PMO look like? I was like, well, what a good PMO looks like is they do everything in their power to facilitate the efficient delivery of projects such that you can extract the value. A
Yeah.
project management office really makes it easy to get stuff done. The person leading the project management office is the best project manager generally in the entire business. They
Yeah.
understand all of the methods, they have great relationship building. And yet this is not the lived experience for most people. They're like, oh, that doesn't sound like our organization.
Yeah. And I've become a bit disillusioned with the concept of PMO. I loved PMO for many, many years. Like I wanted to live in PMO. That's where I wanted to stay. And then I ended up making my way back to projects because I like doing things. I like achieving things. Like I get a great sense of value out of that. So I was like, no, 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 that's where I belong. But what I found interesting about PMO was I would have thought that improving project outcomes was the absolute number one driving force of PMOs. But what I have discovered over my time is that reporting, and sitting at the leadership table, but not many actually sit at a leadership table where they have an equal voice
Yeah.
to any of the people they are serving. And as a result of that, they have very little ability to influence or change outcomes for project managers. And I mean things like those processes are broken and need to be fixed. Those processes have been overcomplicated. There are too many people involved. It's not necessary. You could absolutely cut back our time to delivery if you just streamline those processes. Why does every document need 25 signatures?
Yeah.
This is just ridiculous. And why do those 25 people not actually fully read the document and provide any adequate feedback that lets me know you're actually giving this the right level of scrutiny and challenge that is necessary for us to get this right? Because if I've just got 10 signatories reading it for the sake of you were engaged, is that going to make this a better project outcome? Probably not.
Yeah. I mean, those issues are rife within many organizations, DK. I worked with a food production company at the end of last year, beginning of this year, who wanted to change their approach to project management. And I said, okay, great. And they were like, oh, we're thinking of bringing in a PMO manager. What do you think? I'm like, why do you need one? I was like, that money would be better spent on actually educating and training project managers. I was like, let's make the chief operating officer the owner of project management as a profession within the organization. And then let's create a community of project managers. I think they had 16 project managers. And then let's train them on how to be really great project managers. But before I got to that, I always trained the people who are going to be project sponsors. And there were 8 people who were going to be project sponsors. I was like, the success of this project, is down to you guys, not down to the project managers. If this project
Yeah.
fails, you're on the hook.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
you're, they were coming from a place where project managers had to present projects to the board. I'm like, you the people that govern them. You're the people that present the information to the board of directors on these projects, not project managers. That is you swerving your governance responsibility and saying, well, I'm just going to let this guy talk about my project. No, it's on you to do that. So there has to
Yeah.
be this understanding from senior leaders that their reputation is tied up in projects. And that should encourage them to read business cases and project plans, because actually, from a legacy perspective, they're on the hook. Also, that recognition that project managers provide them with the information for them to be able to make the decisions about what direction this project's going to go in. And if they can't talk learnedly about the project, then you've got this failure of governance, and not necessarily a failure of project management. And project managers, many of them just complain bitterly, rightly, that leaders just aren't interested in projects. The expectation is they'll just happen with minimal input from them, and that's just not true.
Yeah, absolutely. So then what advice would you give organizations that have 600 projects running with 200 staff? Like, because it happens so often. I see it over and over again. We have this absolute dire need to start all these projects and have them all running at the same time, and there are just not enough people to care about them.
Yeah, so I worked with a government agency last year on this, around about that size of organization. So the first thing that I did, and I want to acknowledge there's some really great PMO managers, by the way, who are trying their
Of course.
best um,
Of course.
to steer a steady ship here. And so I worked with the PMO manager, made sure that they had the knowledge that they needed to be able to do their job. And she was absolutely brilliant. She's just like a sponge soaking it all up. Her biggest challenge was the organization expected too many projects to be done for the people that they had. And of course, they had that classic thing where they call people resources, which just dehumanizes the fact that we're overworking people. And
Yeah.
so I worked with the leadership team to help them to understand that not everything could ever be a number one priority. And rather than do more with less, which is this ridiculous phrase that isn't possible, they had to, if you focus on doing less, you get more done, which was a really alien statement to them. They were like, wait, what? I was like, if you do
Yeah.
fewer things, then people have got more energy, they've got more time to do them better, which prevents rework, and
Yes.
actually they get more done.
Yeah.
And so we did that first, and then we trained the trainers. Now, for me, I worked with the PMO manager to design the training, because my
Yep.
approach has always been, it's my job to help you design what good practice looks like, and then I will teach you how to do it so you can do it yourself forever. So you don't have to keep bringing me back in. It's the anti-consultant model, DK. It's financially limiting, but
You make yourself
make
redundant. Yes.
myself redundant, really. But that's what people want. Show me how to do it myself. And so, I helped them
Yeah.
design it, and then I flew over, and then I did the first two training sessions. So we did two days in a week, and then they took it forward. Their delivery rates have improved by 35% in 6 months, because
Wow.
they know how
Wow.
to do
You're
it,
like,
and they're doing fewer
yeah,
things. Who knew?
yeah. You're like Jesus, Colin. You've
Whoa,
taught
whoa,
them how
whoa,
to
whoa.
fish.
The last Liverpudlian to
Hey,
compare himself to Jesus was pilloried in the American press for years. I'm not having that.
you have taught them how to fish and they've done an amazing job. And if I remember correctly, you've actually done that a couple of times in your
Yeah.
life, because that's the second story I've heard of you explaining that with some really good training, you can really improve people's output and the success of projects. But tell me, in that training
Mm.
specifically, what are you training people to do? You're training PMs on how to PM or how to be better communicators.
Yeah, all of those things. So the training generally, so I always break the training into three elements: leadership, culture, methods.
Yep.
And so the leadership piece is on leveraging your strengths, recognizing those opportunities for improvement. How do I build relationships? How do I communicate messages? How do I have courageous conversations? These kinds of things. The team building really is on, well, how do I create a really great project team? No one teaches people how to do that. What does the
No.
dynamics look like? How do I gauge the pulse of the team at any one time? If it's Wednesday
Yes.
and things aren't happening, how do I know where the team is at? And again, that's a skill that you can teach people. And the methods
Yeah.
piece really is the easy piece. The organization will generally have a way of doing things. And sometimes if we tweak that, for the food production company, we tweaked it. And so it was me, kind of talking to them about what that looks like now. And we'd simplified the whole thing. And people were like, this is great, because we'd made it really easy to follow. And of course, there
Yep.
were some templates, and that's just to make it easy. But then we instigated part of the training and the approach. We instigated a monthly community meeting, which is where people came together to share ideas. They weren't being told stuff, which is often a mistake that's
Yes.
made. It was a true
Yes.
community. They
Yes.
shared ideas and they talked about what they'd like to improve. And then there was democracy within
Yes.
the room, and we could never get everybody together all of the time. And so, the training very much focused on the human and the technical skills, but with an emphasis on the human. And I want to make it clear that any gains any organization gets, whether it's project management or culture that I do, the credit is theirs. All I do is give them the skills that they're missing, but then they have to do it, DK. Like, I'm not there
Yes.
holding their hand. I'm not on a virtual call going, you must follow what I said. Although there usually is a follow up and they know that they'll feel deeply embarrassed if they haven't. But
But I think the good thing about a follow-up is that you've taught them, they've gone away and applied it. And then the follow-up is like, I know I didn't get these bits right, or can you just explain that bit to me
right.
again? Because I don't think I did that very well. And can you just cement that for me? And I think that's really invaluable because that's that whole learn, trial, test quickly feedback loop. What better can I do next time?
I'm doing a monthly sessions for one organization where we got the community to actually agree what the 12 subjects would be. And then once a month, I do a virtual call and I will teach them. But it's a mix of me telling you what it is. And then we use Teams to put people in Teams rooms and they talk about it. And the HR manager said to me last week, she's like, it's the best attended virtual thing we've ever done. She's like, I'm just wondering, why is that? I was like, because they designed the curriculum. They're the ones that designed the curriculum.
Yes.
So they're showing up for something that they asked for. This is not you telling
Yes.
them that they have to do this. This group of
Yes.
people designed the curriculum. And then all I do is I take the feedback that they've provided in the past and structure my session and the learning around what they've actually asked for. Who knew that would be well attended?
And you make such a good point because communities of practice have really taken off. But the reality is, attendance has not. And I really wonder whether that is the reason why. Because, if I come to a community of practice session, and I've made this mistake, so I have to take my own advice here. Where you say, okay, we're going to address all of these topics. No, 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 that's not the whole point. Community is we're all going to come like to a town square and we're all just going to chat about what we need and what we see, right? Rather than being told by anybody else.
You know, DK, so in 2008, I worked for a company in New Zealand called Transpower. They're an electrical engineering company. When I joined, they had a very formal chief executive, suit and tie, my kind of guy, British, suit and tie. But, but this was an engineering,
I've heard that ties are coming back.
it's right
I saw
too.
someone wearing a tie today. Are they coming back? I
They never
love a
went.
tie on a
For
man.
people who love wearing ties, they never went away.
I love it.
Um,
Yeah.
So, but he was very, very formal, and one of the things I recognised that formality didn't work in an engineering company. So he left, not acrimoniously or anything. He left, and they brought in an ex-engineer farmer from Gisborne in the north of the country, and he said, what he wanted to do was create an efficient organization, but one that had a sense of we're in this together. We wanted engineers and all of the departments to work together, right? But it was an engineering organization. And one of the things he instigated, which I've copied ruthlessly since he did this, was he instigated these first Friday drinks. Now that sounds like very boring and traditional, but these first Friday drinks were at 4 o'clock on a Friday, not 5 o'clock. They were 4 o'clock. Also, we were an
Yeah.
engineering company, so they were non-alcoholic drinks, right? And he said, I want this to be a community where we show up for each other. And every department, every month, there was a rota, and every department, every month, had to provide some content to the audience. And so he was kind of non-specific about it. He said it has to inform people, it has to educate people, it has to get people talking, and you can choose whatever theme you want. But he wasn't
That would
telling
have been
us to
right
be
up
a
your
community.
alley,
Yeah,
Colin. Yeah.
Like I was like, and one group of engineers did a Hawaiian theme, and they had grass skirts and everything. But the point that
Oh,
I'm making here is, he made the community's responsibility. He could have been like, this
ah,
is the agenda, this is what you're doing, this is what I want to hear. And he said, here's the guidelines. You do whatever you want as long as it does these things. Go for it.
yeah.
So, and it's one of the things that I do with organizations when they're creating a community of practice. It doesn't belong to the PMO manager. It doesn't belong to the COO or whoever. It belongs to the
Mm,
community. What do you want to do? What do you want to see?
yeah,
And
yeah.
what you'll find is that 50% of the project management will say, we want this. Great, go with that. And some people say, but how do we get the rest? It's like, you create something so good that they don't want to miss out.
That correct. Fear of missing
Yeah,
out. It's a real thing.
yeah,
Yeah. So tell me something though as well. I've seen this I've seen this method engaged before where we go out to a group and we say, "What do you want to hear from?" And we might get 2 or 3
yeah,
responses. So that to me suggests you have a highly disengaged group of people, um, who are not willing to put themselves out, put themselves forward. I've either got way too much to do and way too much on my plate, or I just don't feel a bit comfortable being engaged by you for whatever reason.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on those kinds of scenarios?
So it demonstrates either a lack of empathy or poor communication. So the timing has to be right for this stuff, DK. So if you're asking people those questions when it's at a peak of delivery, and so you've got to have a pulse on what's happening in the organization, or if it's when people are on holiday or whatever it is, so that's the empathy piece. Is the timing wrong? But most people, it's communication. Is they go out and tell people that we're starting a community. And so people are like, well, you've already decided what kind of club this is going to be, so I'm not sure I want to join it. Also, they generally use one method of communication. So they'll send out an email. Well, that email is going to be like, we're not great at using email as it is, but that's going to be even lowest down on my priorities given everything else I've got to do. So, what's the face to face? What's the email? What's the recorded video? What methods are you going to use to try and engage people? But it's got to be all about them. It's what's the value to the people that you're asking? What's in it for them? Because if they don't understand what's in it for them, they're never going to respond. And so often for me, it's poor communication. You haven't really done enough to think about, well, why would this group of people want this, and why would they want it now?
Yeah. So tell me then, like, what's a strategy that you could use to try and get them more engaged and get them more excited and wanting to participate in their own learning? Like, how do you do it?
So you got to understand that, what's the problem that you're trying to fix. Not every organization that I work with, I encourage a community of practice. I remember one that I actively was against it. I was like, you don't need it, because these guys are
Mm,
performing really, really well. Um, what you should do is once a year have a internal project management awards, which of course they went on and did, and people actually loved. And what was really interesting about that, DK, was they did these project management awards, and the project managers said we should do this more often. And all of a sudden, then that gave
ah,
rise to a
yeah.
community, but it's because they wanted to do it, right?
Ah,
And so
yes,
with any of these things, you have to focus on what is the value to the people that you seek to serve. And so it's all around
yeah,
capabilities. So a great example is the organization can't afford $1 million in project management development in Australian dollars, right? Or
yeah,
they could, let's say $50,000. They haven't got $50,000.
yeah,
So what can we do as a group of people to educate ourselves? What are the things that we can do to share ideas? How are we going to mitigate future risks? This is the value to them. Future risk mitigation. What can we learn from each other? What are those particular challenges that we face that we would love, like informal coaching from each other? Also, is this a possibility for reverse mentoring, where really experienced project managers can learn from inexperienced, and then vice versa? So it's really got to give it's got to give those people something that they will value. And you know what? If you can do it face to face with biscuits and tea, people love that. Just make it
Yeah.
an event, or if it's virtual, find a good time to do it. Don't make it, the very first thing in the morning or the very last thing, and definitely don't do it over lunchtime, unless you're going to do these brown bag lunch sessions. They're often a good idea. But ultimately, it's what's the value to the people, and do they have agency over what it looks like? And if they do, they're definitely more likely to show up.
Mhm. So I'm going to move off this topic now, but let's talk about agency because I love the word
Mm.
agency. But I'm going to link it back to something else. On LinkedIn, something that drives me absolutely barney is how many people put the words strategic leadership and project management in the same sentence.
Yeah,
And it really does my head in because I know as a PM, I am not invited to the strategy table. I am so far from that table. There is a sponsor that is there to go and engage with their peers about money and strategy and all that kind of stuff. I can put forward what I believe is just a strategic solution, but the reality is 90% of the time that solution has been selected way before I was. And it's been on some PMO list, and eventually the ticket number comes up and it gets assigned to somebody like
yeah.
me. That is as far from strategy and strategic leadership as I could ever imagine. Why does LinkedIn keep putting these two things in the same sentence?
I,
Why?
I blame the Project Management Institute. They did a whole thing on strategic leadership, and it just really
Ah,
frustrated the life out of me, because the two are very different things. Projects are the mechanism by which we deliver strategy. Right. So,
correct.
so by its nature, what we're looking for is great tactical management, not strategic leadership. And what you'll often find is that certain project managers will, how do I put this politely, get above their station a little bit, and think
Yep.
that they're kind of these amazing leaders. And as I always say, you can never call yourself a leader. It's up to other people to say that you're a leader, not you, because you're not leading yourself. You're leading other people. Leadership is really, really difficult to do. Anyway, it's about putting yourself in service to others. But strategy is really determined by the executive team. It's up to them to make those decisions. And then for project managers, it's up to them to execute on those
Correct.
decisions. And so, actually, we don't need strategic leadership in project management. What we need is just great project management. That would be
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Recognizing that very few people ever become true leaders. I don't want to think ill of these people who are posting on LinkedIn about strategic leadership.
No,
I'm sure their heart's in the
I
right
just feel
place,
like
but
I'm sure it is, but it's almost like you put a next level layer of it's not judgment but expectation on who I am and what I'm doing when what I'm doing is hard enough. Yeah.
yeah,
And the focus needs to be on the what and how we are doing it and why we are doing it, rather than this concept of, you will sit amongst leaders and talk strategy. No, I won't. I'll be talking to my risk manager and I'm talking to my developers and I'm talking to my testers. And I don't want to be near the strategic leadership table. I've got enough on my plate. If
yeah.
they've decided that it's part of the strategy, great. I'm
Yeah,
doing it.
I
Yeah.
just want to know what priority it is, because I know at some
Yeah.
stage I'm going to have to fight for people that are required by another project. So, from a
Yes.
strategic perspective, where do I sit? In 1 to 10
Yeah.
projects that we're doing, 1 to 50 that we're doing right now, where am I? Because if I'm number five, I know that I have priority over certain people, and rather than tell those people, I have to work with the other project managers to say, I need DK for the month of October to do these things. So I agree, 100%. I agree.
As we wrap up, I want to say a huge thank you to Colin D. Ellis for joining us today. We've explored that project management isn't just about timelines and budgets, it's the heartbeat of progress, yet it thrives only when we truly care for the people behind it. Thanks to Colin for his insights, and let's commit to valuing project management more in our own worlds. And if you haven't experienced the page turning joy of the book, I highly encourage you to go out and buy the project book, which is available on Goodreads, Amazon, and other platforms, as well as Ellis's interviews and articles. And thank you to all of our faithful listeners for tuning into this episode of Powering ProjeX. If you found value in today's episode, please do subscribe, share it with your community of project professionals, and leave me a review. Your encouragement helps me reach more people just like you who may benefit from our community. But don't stop there. Engage with us. Share your challenges and successes and let me know which skills or techniques you'd like me to cover. Further, help me discover the voices and stories that will benefit our entire community. If you have a guest suggestion, comment below or email me at poweringprojects@gmail.com. Until next time, keep powering your projects from vision to victory. This is DK and Colin signing out. The content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional, legal, or financial advice. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of any affiliated organisations or sponsors. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information on project management methodologies and related topics, no guarantee is made regarding the completeness, accuracy, or applicability of the content to your specific circumstances. Listeners are encouraged to consult with qualified professionals before making decisions based on the information shared in this podcast. The hosts, guests, and producers are not liable for any losses, damages, or outcomes resulting from the use of this podcast's content. By listening to this podcast, you agree to assume all risks associated with the application of the information provided. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you'll find value in our discussions.